For 70 years, 4 companies controlled every outboard motor on the water. Mercury, Yamaha, Honda, Suzuki. They set the prices. They made the rules. Nobody could touch them. Then something happened that nobody saw coming. A Chinese manufacturer released an engine that costs half the price of a Mercury. But here's the thing. It wasn't just cheaper, it was better, more powerful, smarter technology, features that American motors won't have for years. If you want to know how this changes everything about boating, hit subscribe and ring that bell right now, because what I'm about to show you will shock the entire marine industry. Right now, 3 major US dealers have already placed secret orders. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the market. Brunswick Corporation, Mercury's parent company, issued emergency warnings to every dealer in America. This is the story of how one engine from China is about to destroy everything we thought we knew about boating. When Parsun Heavy Industries unveiled the F350 at the 2024 Shanghai Boat Show, Western journalists dismissed it as another knockoff. The marine press barely covered it. Industry veterans walked past their booth without stopping, but the engineers who did stop and look at the spec sheet saw something that made them uncomfortable. This wasn't a copy. This was something entirely new. The numbers told a story that challenged 70 years of market dynamics. 350 horsepower from a V8 configuration, matching the output of Mercury's Verado 350. But the price? $18,500, less than half of Mercury's $42,000 price tag. The weight came in at 485 pounds, 30% lighter than anything in its power class. These weren't incremental improvements, these were leaps. Parsun wasn't a startup. They'd been building small outboards for European markets since 2001, quietly learning, studying, waiting. But the F350 represented something different. This was their statement to the world. They'd hired engineers from Volvo Penta, recruited designers from Honda Marine, and poached technology specialists from Mercury itself. The Chinese government had invested $4.2 billion in marine research and development since 2020. This engine was the result. The first believers weren't in America. They were in Australia, where fuel costs and distances make efficiency crucial. Captain Mike Harrison from Gold Coast Marine Tours became an unlikely pioneer. He bought one F350 as an experiment for his backup boat. The engine ran for 6 months without a single issue. It burned 40% less fuel than his Yamahas. The self-diagnostic system caught a cooling problem before it caused damage. Harrison ordered 4 more engines before telling anyone what he'd discovered. But Parsun's real innovation wasn't in the mechanics. It was in electronics. Every F350 came with artificial intelligence diagnostics that could predict failures before they happened. Satellite connectivity meant the engine could update its own software. Carbon fiber components reduce weight while increasing strength. These were features Mercury and Yamaha had been promising for years but never delivered. In January 2025, something unprecedented happened in the marine industry. Brunswick Corporation, Mercury's parent company, issued an internal memo to every authorized dealer in North America. Any service center that worked on Parsun products would immediately lose their Mercury authorization. Yamaha followed within 48 hours, Suzuki within a week. The message was clear: choose a side. For 3 months, the early adopters reported nothing but success. Florida fishing guides were documenting fuel savings that seemed impossible. Charter operators in the Keys were running full-day trips on half the fuel they'd budgeted. Racing teams in Australia clocked identical speeds to their Japanese alternatives at a fraction of the cost. The marine forums buzzed with cautious optimism. Could this actually be real? Then April arrived, and with it, the first cracks in the facade. A sport fishing boat off the coast of Tampa lost power 40 miles offshore. The gearbox oil seal had failed, allowing salt water to contaminate the lower unit. The captain managed to limp home on his backup engine, but when he reached the dock, he discovered a harsh reality. No mechanic within 500 miles would touch the Parsun. The diagnostic software was proprietary, requiring special tools that only existed in China. The nearest parts warehouse was in Vancouver, with a 3-week shipping time for basic components. Jim Rodriguez, who runs Miami Marine Supply, found himself in an impossible position. His customers were begging for these engines. The profit margins were incredible, but the liability terrified him. If something broke and he couldn't fix it, if someone got stranded or worse, his 30-year business could disappear overnight. Insurance companies were already refusing to cover boats with Chinese outboards, citing unproven reliability and lack of service infrastructure. The online forums that had celebrated the F-350 turned skeptical. TheWholeTruth.com became a battlefield of opinions. A post from April 18th summed up the growing concern. A user wrote that his Parsun had died offshore and he'd spent 8 hours waiting for a tow. The comment section exploded with arguments between early adopters defending their purchase and traditionalists saying they'd warned everyone. While American dealers struggled with warranty concerns, something remarkable was happening on the other side of the world. By May 2025, Parsun had captured 22% of the Southeast Asian outboard market. Nigeria placed an order for 5,000 units to power their government patrol boats. Brazil's largest boat manufacturer, Schaefer Yachts, announced they were switching their entire line to Parsun power. The global market was shifting beneath America's feet. The numbers coming out of Mercury's quarterly earnings call sent shockwaves through Wall Street. Stock price dropped 8% in a single day. Profit margins that had held steady at 34% for a decade compressed to 19%. For the first time since World War II, American manufacturers were losing significant market share in marine propulsion. Yamaha announced layoffs at their Georgia plant. 12 dealerships across Florida and Texas either closed or consolidated. The unthinkable was happening. Tom Mitchell had spent 30 years as a Mercury technician in Fort Lauderdale. He knew every bolt, every seal, every quirk of American outboards, but now he watched kids with laptops diagnosing Chinese motors he couldn't even open without voiding warranties. His expertise, built over decades, was becoming obsolete. The specialized tools in his shop, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, were useless on these new engines. Mitchell wasn't alone. Across America, thousands of marine technicians faced the same reality. At the Miami International Boat Show 2025, the transformation was visible. The Mercury booth, traditionally the centerpiece of the show, stood half empty. Serious buyers had already walked through, taken brochures, and moved on. Across the aisle, crowds surrounded Parsun's display where engines diagnosed themselves on smartphones, where customers could watch real-time fuel consumption data, where prices made people do double takes. The innovation gap was widening. While American manufacturers debated tariffs and protectionism, Parsun announced their 2026 model, hydrogen hybrid technology with a 500-mile range, 60% fewer emissions, a price point that would destroy what remained of traditional profit margins. The future wasn't coming. It had arrived, and it spoke Mandarin. Dr. Sarah Chen from MIT's Marine Engineering Department had been warning the industry for years. This wasn't about cheap labor anymore. China had moved beyond copying. They'd invested $42 billion in marine research since 2020, more than the United States had spent in the previous 2 decades. They'd hired the best minds from established companies, offering salaries that Western manufacturers couldn't match. But money was only part of the equation. The real advantage was vertical integration. Parsun owned everything from aluminum smelters to microchip factories. When supply chains collapsed during COVID, American manufacturers waited months for parts. Parsun never stopped production. They controlled every component, every process, every step from raw materials to the finished engine. Mercury depended on dozens of suppliers. Parsun depended on no one. An anonymous Mercury executive, speaking on condition of anonymity, admitted what everyone in the industry already knew. They'd seen this coming in 2019. Internal reports had warned about Chinese investment in marine technology. Strategy meetings had discussed the threat. But quarterly earnings mattered more than 5-year plans. Stock buybacks took precedence over research and development. Shareholders wanted profits now, not protection against future competition. The patent numbers revealed the depth of American complacency. In 2023 alone, Chinese companies filed 1,200 marine-related patents. American companies filed less than 300. While Mercury refined 40-year-old fuel injection systems, Parsun partnered with BYD's battery division to develop hybrid technology. While Yamaha made incremental improvements to existing designs, Parsun integrated Huawei's 5G modules for remote diagnostics and artificial intelligence. The economics were brutal but simple. American manufacturers had maintained 40% profit margins because they could. 4 companies controlling the market meant prices rose every year, regardless of innovation. Dealers had no alternatives. Customers had no choice. The system worked perfectly until someone from outside refused to play by the established rules. Parsun didn't just offer a cheaper engine. They offered a better engine at a cheaper price. In capitalism, that combination is almost impossible to defeat. The truth was uncomfortable, but undeniable. Protection had bred complacency. Profit had replaced progress. As of November 2025, 3 scenarios are unfolding simultaneously. Congress debates a 45% tariff on Chinese marine products, a move that might protect American manufacturers, but would double prices for consumers. Mercury races to complete Project Lightning, their emergency electric outboard program scheduled for 2026, trying to leapfrog the competition they'd ignored, and Parsun quietly breaks ground on a manufacturing facility in Tijuana, Mexico, 60 miles from the California border, ready to circumvent any trade restrictions. Investment firm Woodbridge Marine released a forecast that sent ripples through the industry. By 2027, Chinese manufacturers will control 35% of the global outboard market. By 2030, that number could reach 50%. The report's conclusion was stark. American companies have 18 months to transform or face irrelevance. The era of comfortable oligopoly is over. A veteran dealer in Houston, who's been selling boats for 40 years, put it simply. He'd survived 2 recessions, COVID and Hurricane Katrina. But this was different. This wasn't a temporary crisis to the weather. This was evolution, and they were the dinosaurs. Young customers didn't care about brand heritage. They cared about technology, efficiency, and price. Parsun delivered all 3. The deeper question extends beyond outboards. This is about what happens when protected industries meet hungry competition, when tradition confronts disruption, when made in America costs twice as much as made in China and delivers half the innovation. The marine industry is just the beginning. The same forces are gathering in automotive, aerospace, and industrial equipment. Perhaps the real revolution isn't in the engines themselves, but in what they represent. The end of assumptions. The price of complacency. The brutal truth that in engineering, as in nature, adaptation isn't a choice, but a requirement for survival. The water doesn't care what flag flies above your motor. It only cares if it runs. The American marine industry stands at a crossroads. One path leads to protectionism, tariffs, and slow decline. The other demands innovation, investment, and uncomfortable change. The next 18 months will determine which path they choose. The clock is ticking, and the tide has already turned.